Everybody, I'm Rob Raybon. A couple weeks ago, I realized that it was my 10-year anniversary of my 2011 Mustang. This isn't going to be a video about all the stories and all the parts and stuff that are on this Mustang, what's been done to it and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be more towards if it's dependable or not. 2011 was the first year for the Coyote, and a lot of people say that there's an issue with the number 8 cylinder frying and there's transmission issues and all this other stuff. So I'm going to tell you about my car and what I've replaced in the last 90,000 miles and the last 10 years and some common issues that you'll find on a 2011 Mustang. Right now you can get a 2011 Mustang for pretty cheap, and I really think that it's the best bargain that you can get right now as far as performance. If you can pick one of these up, you got a 400 horsepower car with a 6-speed that you could daily drive that'll be dependable and treat you well for a very long time. They've been holding their value kind of well, but not as well as like some European cars and some Japanese cars. A really quick little backstory on the car. I bought this thing in 2011 on a very snowy day, and I actually found mine used with like 4,000 miles on it. This was in January of 2011, which at the time it was actually hard to find a new 5.0, let alone a used one. So with this thing being like $8,000 off the original sticker, it seemed like a really good bargain. And for the most part, I think that this was a really good bargain. But anyway, let's get into this. I'll tell you about what has been replaced on my car, what's broken on my car, and that kind of stuff.
Let's venture underneath of the car. So I did replace the diff cover with this nice B&M diff cover. Not because it needed to be replaced, but just because it looked so good. It's a lot stronger than stock. The stock one's like a stamped piece. The only issues I've had in the rear was a leaky pinion seal, which is pretty common on these cars. To replace that, you got to drop the drive shaft. It's a little bit of a pain to replace that, but I don't know if that was caused from the car just being old, being driven forever, or from when the guy that did my 373s, if he put too much diff fluid in, or I don't know. I did have the gears swapped out from 331s to 373s, which I kind of regret. This car with boost, it really needs a longer gear, so I think 331s were probably a better choice, but at the time it was naturally aspirated and I didn't know any better. That was done back in like 2012. This does have a bunch of UPR pieces for the suspension. When the rear suspension makes a little bit of noise, it might be the sway bar in link bushings. These UPR pieces have been pretty good. I like the lower control arms. They're chromoly. They're starting to get a little rusty. And I do have the lower control arm relocation brackets. That centered the rear a little bit better with the bags. It also made everything a little bit stiffer in the back, I think. It's also supposed to help with traction, but this car doesn't really have that good of traction, to be honest. It's probably because the tires are old as crap, but whatever. The rear shocks currently are Vikings. I don't really like these shocks, to be honest. It seems like the adjustments on them are getting a little rough. I guess they're more for drag racing applications. I think they're just getting a little bit too beat up with me driving the car as much as I do and trying to drift. So I think I'm gonna try to get these swapped out for BCs. The guy that I traded / sold my Air to was supposed to give me his BC shocks, but he did not. He kept his because he's a dick. But anyway, I definitely want to get some BC shocks in the rear to match the front suspension at some point. The exhaust is Flowmaster Outlaw series axlebacks. I never really had an issue with the stock stuff. It just sounds a lot better with Flowmasters on it. I will admit that the older that I get, the more I wish that these were a little bit quieter. They are a bit loud, but it makes the car sound like a muscle car. The factory exhaust on these cars is really quiet compared to these, and really quiet in general, to be honest. Also, another issue was the pin that locks all your rear stuff together inside. That pin did break, but that might have been from the guy that installed the gears. I'm not sure. He might have over-tightened it or something, but that thing snapped off in there. But it was easy enough to get out. Yukon makes a kit actually for that purpose. It comes with a really long flexible drill bit and some easy outs that work good for it. I was able to drill in a little bit to the point where it just started spinning, and then I took a pick and backed it all out. But yeah, that's the only issues that I've had in the rear. In the trunk, it is completely gutted because I used to have air suspension in here, plus, you know, weight reduction and stuff, race car stuff. The rear seats don't weigh much, but I guess it does make a little bit of a difference. It makes it a lot louder in here, so I will say if you're gonna pull your rear seat, just be prepared for all the extra noise. Occasionally my trunk gets a little bit of water in it. I'm not sure if that's because the seal's going bad on this or because I got so much stuff going on with the rear wing setup. This does have an aftermarket rear wing, so it doesn't have all that sealing and stuff that's on the factory wing. So it could possibly be leaking from that. I'm not sure. It's one of those things I still need to research. I do have a booster pump in the back also for the supercharger setup. Occasionally that used to cut out for some reason. It hasn't cut out in a long time, but that was kind of a mild issue that would piss me off. But I hadn't done it in a while, so Nobody really likes the 2010 to 2012 taillights, but I kind of like them because everybody went to the 13s. It's almost more rare to see these taillights now. When I go to a car show, everybody's got the 13, 14 taillights. So I actually kind of like them now. I feel like it's a good look. This is the GT Premium, so it has the nice My Color stuff for the floor lights and for the little side molding. It always gets pretty dirty in there. I don't clean this car enough, so it's never really bothered me. I've changed the door panels out and the seats have been changed a couple times. These are the factory frames and these TMI covers go over top with new foam. I've had these in the car since 2015 and they've been really awesome. TMI makes some really good stuff. But overall, the factory stuff hasn't been an issue at all on the driver's side. On the passenger side, however, on the passenger side, this motor did give out. It doesn't go forward and backward anymore. I'm not sure what happened with that. It goes up and down, but just not back and forth. So that is a little bit of an issue that the seat's broken. I don't know how common of an issue that is. Also, the fit on this side just, I don't know, wasn't very good. The driver's side was awesome, but this side, for some reason with that, I don't know if I had somebody in here that messed it up at some point. I've had a lot of friends in and out of this car over the years, so maybe one of them messed that up. Same thing with the trim, like this handle pops off, and I think somebody might have kind of popped that off at some point. And a nice Vaughn Gittin Jr. signature there. All these interior pieces have held up pretty well. The steering wheel has gotten a little scratched up over the years. I think one of these scratches was from when I was putting the seats in and out. When I went to the Pro Viper seats, I think I might have nicked this a little bit just because I was trying to put the seats in by myself. And then all these random scratches and scuffs and everything. That's just from over the years, I think, just rubbing against it, playing steering wheel drums maybe. Another common issue is going to be the controls for the steering wheel. These rub clean a lot. You can see that I'm always trying to move forward and I'm never satisfied, so I rubbed a little bit of paint off of that. It's not that big of an issue if you use the sync function and you just change tracks through your phone all the time, but you can do that through the steering wheel, and if you do all the time, you're gonna mess that up. The stereo's been pretty good on this. Occasionally it's a pain in the ass to get Bluetooth audio to work if you're using the voice commands. It's just one of those things you get used to after a while, I guess. Compared to a lot of modern stereos, this thing isn't the best sounding, but I think it sounds pretty good for the time. I've been in a few other modern cars and modern Mustangs, and their stereos sound way better, especially if you get the ones with the subs built in, and this doesn't have the built-in sub. You can get the S197 Coyote cars with a built-in sub, and it makes a big difference. My friend Ron had one, and it sounded amazing. So the fit on the center console is a little rough right now because I did install an ASD Hydro. I was going to do a video on this. I still might. I recorded it, but it didn't seem like it was going to be that hot of a topic. I still got to trim a little bit here to get this to push back up a little. It will if I force it, but it just, I don't know. It's one of those things I never got around to because I was trying to get this thing to club loose. It worked out pretty nice with the center console. There's like a factory knockout right here, and the Hydro went right through that and kind of fit pretty well. Almost like it was made for a Hydro. It was kind of interesting. But I did have to remove the factory handbrake, so I don't have an emergency brake on this car now. I just don't park on hills, and I always throw this in gear. Maybe not the safest thing, but it's what we got. I think at some point if I put some sort of cage in this car, I'm gonna maybe have some sort of ratchet strap, or I don't know, some sort of bungee to hold this in. I gotta figure that out because I guess that would be a lot safer. Everybody bitches about the cup holder placement on these cars. It's never been a big deal to me because I don't buy extreme, like super duper big gulp bladder busters. I usually just have cans of Monster in here and occasionally coffee cups. And as long as you keep your elbow high, it's not a big deal. But I guess people are spoiled and they just want something to bitch about, so everybody bitches about these. But if you don't complain about everything, it's not going to be a big deal. Just depends what kind of person you are. There's an auxiliary hookup here. It's a 1/8 inch, and then there's a USB hookup. You can connect to the stereo through USB, and that's always been a pretty good function. And there's also another cigarette lighter adapter in here, which is nice. If you want to charge your phone, you can just hide it in here and have your cigarette lighter adapter plugged in, and you don't have to worry about anything. It's not as cool as wireless charging on some modern cars, but I think it's pretty neat. Usually in here, I only have some hand sanitizer and a mask because COVID is still a thing. And I also keep this little Lego guy around just because I got him at SEMA. It seems like a little lucky charm. I used to keep a lucky penny in here too, but I think I lost that. Maybe that's why I've been having bad luck. So I went to SEMA one year, and at Ford's booth you could build your own little Lego man. So I built this little guy. Kept him in the car the whole time since that trip, just as like a little lucky charm or something. So get back in your little house, little man. You can see the chrome on this is just kind of scratched up, and pretty scuffed up. I could probably clean this up a little, but it's still gonna have all these scratches and kind of sucks, but whatever. This car's 10 years old now. Another issue with these cars is the transmission. The MT82 has been known to be a piece of crap. This is the original transmission in this car and the original clutch, which is pretty amazing. I know people that have burnt up these clutches at like 10,000 miles. I don't go drag racing every week or anything, but this car has had a lot of passes on it, and I've done a lot of burnouts. It's still been pretty solid. Like I said, stock clutch, it's not slipping somehow, even though this car's had a supercharger on it for more than half of its life. And it goes in all the gears. It's not the smoothest transmission, but it's not the notchiest I've been in. If anybody has been in my Fox, you know that T5 in that car was garbage. I would basically just bang it in the gear, but this transmission's been pretty solid. I think a lot of the issues with the MT82 is user error. I hate to say that. If you get offended by that, I'm sorry, but I think that it is user error with these cars. As long as you're not trying to power shift it and you're letting off the gas when you're shifting, I think that it's going to hold up, and that goes for the clutch too. Another thing that everybody notices when I'm driving around taking pictures of me eating behind the wheel is that all the traction control and ABS lights are on this car. That's because I do have a race tune, and in the race tune they disable the ABS and the traction control. Thank you Rev Auto for doing awesome tunes on this car, by the way. But now it's completely off because I have the ABS disconnected completely. If you disconnect the ABS completely, you can go ahead and drift this car a lot better. You won't have ABS trying to do its traction control thing, and it does have stability control too. Stability control will let you do a burnout, but you can't really get the car sideways. So if you're trying to do donuts, you need to turn the stability control off completely. In case you didn't know how to do that, there's a button down here for traction control. If you tap it once, it turns traction control off, but keeps stability control on. But to disable the stability control altogether, you need to put your foot on the brake and hold this for like 5 seconds, I think. It might be 15 seconds. And then it'll turn advanced track off completely. So that'll allow you to do donuts and other chaotic stuff in the car. Like I said, I don't have to worry about it now because my ABS is disconnected completely. The steering wheel is scarred up. So another issue with a lot of the factory cars is the aluminum hood. A lot of the factory hoods will get corrosion underneath of the paint on the front side of the hood. I don't have to worry about that because this is a Tiger Racing fiberglass hood. This hood's been on the car since 2015, and on the first road trip I hit a tumbleweed that was the size of a small Christmas tree, and that actually cracked the hood a little bit. It wasn't enough that I need to like cut this out and repair it or anything crazy. It was just enough that it like cracked it to where I know it's there, and it makes me sad. But it's not that big a deal because, like I said before, it's a driver's car. I have these Aero Catch hood pins on here, which if you are doing a fiberglass hood, I recommend, because it seems like on these cars, if you put a lightweight fiberglass hood, this will just shake around because you only have that center mount on the hood. So one of the coolest things about the Coyote motor is the Coyote cover, but I do not have that on my motor because I have this big Paxton. If you get a Paxton kit on your Coyote, you're gonna have to cut the front of the cover, and I didn't want to do that, so this is just all open. This is a really cool kit. This is the second Paxton that I've had on this car, and I really love it. I've never had any issues. I think my first kit might have had a little bit of a boost leak, because this kit definitely feels more powerful. This is the 8-rib kit, so I kind of think maybe the belt was slipping on the other one. Not that I was making any kind of crazy boost. This is just the factory setup, so I think I'm running about 6 pounds or something. It's just the stock pulley. But internally, this motor is completely untouched. The only thing I've changed on this car, motor-wise, is the injectors, and I've done a couple sets of spark plugs in this. I change the oil pretty regularly, and I haven't had any issues with this motor, except for, better knock on wood again. The only times I've had any kind of drama with it besides shutting off because of the booster pump was when I had a really bad coolant leak when I was doing a second gear burnout at some car meet thing. I think there was a bubble in the coolant system and the cap blew off. And then I had a big problem trying to purge everything. I ended up replacing the water pump because I thought the water pump impeller was gone because the car kept overheating. I never let it get too hot. As soon as it got hot, I would shut this thing down. But the motor's still powerful after all these miles, and that coolant issue was kind of the only major one. I did have an alternator go up on this. When I did the Paxton 8-rib kit, my alternator started going up, I think because it was just getting old, so I did change that out. And what else? This is still stock fan, stock radiator. It's had stock internals, stock heads, stock cams. I've removed all these plastic covers because it would change the color so many times that it just became a pain in the ass to take this out. I did like 3 colors in a year, or was it 4 or 5? I don't remember. I did a lot of colors in 1 year, so I just took this off completely. It seemed easier just to spray the car when I could just pull the grill out. The grill does have these stupid plastic tabs that wind up snapping after a while, so that kind of sucks. Factory headlights have these tabs on them, and on the factory headlights I did break one of those, so I wound up buying these aftermarket ones. And these aftermarket ones really suck. I'm not a fan of these. A couple of the bars have burnt out on these. Amanda has really similar headlights and her tri-bars are all burnt out too. Another common issue seems to be the front bumper. If you have a big front mount, you got to cut a lot of the front bumper out. And when you go to put your bumper on, it seems like these never want to line up. I've seen a lot of people do quick releases on these to make it a little bit more snug. You can do like this pin style release. I get a little bit of extra support because of the fender flares. It kind of keeps everything bolted a little bit tighter, but still you can see this ridge. If you're really worried about fitment of stuff like this, you probably shouldn't supercharge your car or turbo it. You should probably just keep it all stock and hang out at your Walmart parking lots or whatever. If anyone was curious about disconnecting the ABS, that is down here. This is like a big connector that you can just kind of like hit the tab and you can pull it right out. I don't recommend doing this if you're driving your car on the street a lot because of safety reasons. If you get rid of that ABS thing, you're not going to have ABS, you're not going to have traction control, and you're not going to have stability control. You can see that this thing has 89,614 miles currently. That MPG rating is terrible, and it's probably accurate. This thing is actually I think I might need an O2 sensor in this because it is running pretty rich currently. For almost 90,000 miles and this thing being supercharged more than half of that life, and 2 cross-country road trips and everywhere else we've taken this, I think that this motor and transmission is super reliable. I really can't complain about this car. It's been really nice to me, and it really hasn't needed anything except gas and oil, and if I didn't supercharge this, I really wouldn't have needed to do anything to this motor for a long time. With just the cold air intake, when I put the motor back in the car in 2017, with that cold air intake from Flowmaster, it made like 417 wheel horsepower, which was pretty impressive for a motor that had been sitting around for a year, and it had pretty high mileage back then, but it hasn't really needed much at all. Another quick note with the Coyote, even with all these miles, a lot of people have complain that these motors burn a lot of oil. Mine doesn't really burn any oil. I check it every so often and I haven't had any kind of major oil loss with this thing. Even with the supercharger being on it and with the supercharger needing oil. I don't know if it's because I do oil changes so regularly, but I haven't had any kind of blow-by issues and it doesn't eat any. Another thing that I did change on this car was the brakes. The pads and the rotors were still good. I mean, they still worked, but I just figured it was time. When I did the dual caliper brackets, I just went ahead and changed everything. Another big thing with the Mustangs are going to be tires. This thing has been through a few different sets of tires, and I obviously let them go too long without changing them. These tires here are really bald. I need to get a new set soon, but I've just been concentrating on other projects, and I don't have the money for another set of tires right now because I spent money on this thing. I don't know how many sets of tires I've had on this car. It's probably been more than your average car with 90,000 miles. I've had a few different sets of wheels on this car too, so the tire usage has been spread out just a little. But if you do get one of these cars, you can expect to buy more tires than your average car just because they do spin a lot. Especially if you put a supercharger on it and you're flooring it in second gear, it's just going to spin and fry your tires. So one other small little part that broke on this car that I forgot to mention was the steering rack. This car does have electric power steering, which kind of sucks for drifting and stuff. There's not really like a lot of feedback with the electric power steering. There are ways around this by getting a Cortex module, but I haven't done that yet. I haven't really looked into it much either, to be honest. I just know that my friend Matt Sopa said that it's awesome. But the harness on the rack wound up frying because I don't have any kind of fender liners and I don't have the underbody like cover for the motor. So water wound up getting into the steering rack harness and wound up frying that part of the harness. So it broke off
the tabs and I had no power steering, which really sucks on electric power steering vehicles. If that fails while you're driving, it is really tough to steer, even at high speeds. It used to be with hydraulic power steering racks, you could kind of get away with driving them manually, but this thing is almost undrivable if your power steering rack fails. I was able to drive it very carefully home. When it failed, I was going to pick up a pizza for dinner, so I wasn't really too far from home, but it was just one more thing that I had to replace. I found a part on eBay pretty cheap, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Just another thing that broke. I have an 89 Volvo 240 wagon, and I also have a 2000 Power Stroke E350 van. It's a 7.3 Power Stroke, which is supposed to be the most durable motor in the world, and I can't even drive that truck right now. But this car, I can drive this anywhere right now. I could drive this across the country and feel safe about it. The Power Stroke's down, the Volvo 240 was down for a little bit with an oil leak, which turned out to not be that big of a deal, but it leaked out all of its oil, and this car has consistently been just amazing. No major issues, just oil and gas, and I did do one battery. I forgot to mention that I did change the battery. It was the original battery from 2011 up until when I took the motor out, and then I took that battery and put it in a Volkswagen that I had. So that battery lasted, I think, 7 years altogether, and I can't even find a battery that lasts 2 years now. I know people with Optimas that are only lasting like 2 years, and this factory battery lasted 7. So I don't know if I'm really lucky with all the dependability of this car, but I know I got lucky with a lot of the other things of this car, just my whole story with it. But it's really a dependable car. It's comfortable, heated seats still work, the air conditioning works, the motor's still powerful. It made around 600 horsepower when I installed this particular kit back in 2018. So even with all these miles, it still made around 600 horsepower, and it still blows the tires off. So yeah, that's all the issues I can think of as far as durability and stuff. So that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. I have a lot of other 2011 Mustang content. Actually, I have another video about everything that I've been through with this car and what's done to the car. I really need to do an updated version of that video because it's a different color than what it was. It's been through a bunch of different colors, but there's a whole nother video on that, and I really need to redo that because that was rushed, and because I'm better at editing and stuff now, I can do a way better job, I think. So I'm gonna redo that video. This is gonna be my forever car. I'm never gonna get rid of this thing. This is always gonna be in my driveway, or if I'm homeless, I'm gonna live in this car. I'm never gonna sell it. Unless somebody was to give me like a stupid amount of money, but even then I'd have to think about it for a while. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please consider hitting like, and please consider subscribing. We got a lot of different projects going on. We have a Skyline and a bunch of Mustangs and a Barra swap and a diesel van that I really need to fix. Occasionally we'll do some gear reviews on video stuff and car stuff. And right now that's pretty much all that I do. Yeah, I don't have much of a life. But thanks for watching. I hope that you're being safe, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.